All right, well, I know that Councilmember Vaughn will be joining us, but we'll go ahead and get started because I want to be respectful of people's time, and then just thinking that we need to be out of here about 7:30, just from a a time perspective. What I was hoping to do is just kind of let you know what I've been doing these first 4 weeks, and then hear from you. Just kind of any concerns or thoughts or suggestions would be appreciated. First, I was appointed to the Environment Finance Committee and the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. And we've been meeting throughout the weeks, getting updates on, it's a bonding year, and so hearing some of the bonding proposals and then some small policy bills and appropriation bills. We do have a surplus of $320 million. Most of that has to come from the fact that the feds passed the CHIPS funding, which is the Child Health Improvement Insurance. And so I think that that really helped our forecast. One of the biggest items that we'll be dealing with here in the coming weeks is the tax conformity bill. So I'm sure you guys have heard that the federal government passed a tax bill, and now Minnesota has to decide what we'll conform to and what we won't. And usually these are fairly non-controversial bills. This is not going to be, because I think there's some big ticket items for us that will cost some money. We want to focus, at least my priority is focusing on the individual taxpayer and the families instead of the big businesses that aren't even headquartered here, that received a lot of the benefit from the federal permanent tax cuts from the federal tax bills. So I think we're going to be going through that very cautiously. I'm a little confused at why we've passed one bill in the Senate. I'm not in the majority, but that's not how I recall it from 8 years ago. I could tell you this, and I think I'm ready to say this, is I was in the House for 4 years, 8 years ago. It is way more partisan than I thought it was, and it wasn't that way 8 years ago. So a lot has changed, and that's unfortunate, and it's directly injected into our process, and it's not good for the state. It's not good for how we should be operating the state, and it's certainly not good for Minnesotans, and we need to change it. And I think we change it by making sure the people that come up behind me don't get treated the way that I'm being treated, as far as having bills literally stolen out of, I introduce them and somebody takes them and puts their name on them and then passes them and doesn't allow me to participate in it. Something as personal as the 3M settlement money to our district, that bill was stolen by a different senator, and they won't let any of us East Metro folks that are Democrats on the bill. That's just not how I operate. That's not how we should operate. And so I think, we just got to keep drawing attention to that and how things are being done, because it has to change. And like I said, I can just control me, and what I commit is, times will change just like they have all the time when it comes to politics. And all I know is when I do have there's 67 senators, right? And I'm number 67 of 67. And so when I maybe get a little bit more seniority, I just know that I'm going to treat people the way I want to be treated and make sure that they have a voice in it. So it's Commissioner Slavic. And then I also want to introduce Councilmember Vaughn for folks. And we have Conservation District Member Louise Smolich here, so appreciate everyone coming. Talk a little bit about some of the bills that I've introduced. One is for the Hastings City Hall. There's a bonding proposal for improvements here. We have a bonding proposal for what's called the Hero Center in Cottage Grove, which is a public safety training center. We have the South St. Paul Library has a proposal in for improvements, and then Concord Street in South St. Paul are some of the bonding bills. As I said, it's a bonding year. That's our our main focus is a bonding bill and policy this year. So speaking of policy, some of the bills that I've introduced bipartisanly with Representative Frankie, who has been very helpful to me, being that they kind of are not allowing us to do anything in the Senate. If you're a Democrat, Representative Frankie has kind of made sure to see what he can do to help get some of my bills through. We have a threat assessment bill. Obviously, school safety is a big focus. And what that bill does is creates threat assessment teams within the schools so that the local law enforcement and school districts can communicate together and have better communication to hopefully work on making sure that we don't have tragedies like we've seen recently in our schools with gun violence. Another bill I'm working on with Representative Frankie is a distracted driving bill. It's obviously a big issue these days, and it needs to be handled. Whether it's the hands-free, which I support, and it is moving through the process in both bodies, it's important to hold folks accountable. And so what Representative Frankie and I have is to increase the penalty for criminal vehicular homicide when it's been a result of a phone, being on a phone or texting or whatnot. We're hopefully all aware of the 3M settlement money. I talked about that briefly, but that's $850 million, minus $125 million for lawyers. And what we're looking at for legislation there, that again will say was stolen from me, is putting that money aside so that we know that it's being used for the area that was affected by the contamination from 3M. And then we're asking for reporting, and that would be biannually so that we know where the money is going. I don't want this money to be spent outside of the district, up north, down south. It needs to be here to take care of our aquifer and to make sure we have clean drinking water. The other proposal I have is to use some of that money for private well testing. We have quite a few people in Senate District 54 that are on private wells that may have not already been tested by the MPCA. So I want to allow for that so that if there is a need for remediation, those funds can be accessible to families that are on private wells. I have a bill in to mandate that the Board of Teaching that holds our teachers' licensing are mandated reporters, so that when they know that there's a creepy teacher and there's something going on with bad behavior, that's reported to the police. We've had some instances where complaints have been provided to the Board of Teaching and they haven't been followed through. And so we want to make sure that goes through. I also have a bill in for mental health parity. We, with ease, can kind of navigate through our health insurance process and with our general health. But when it comes to mental health, it's not that easy to navigate, from anywhere from inpatient treatment to community-based treatment. It's not easy to navigate that through the process, and so this requires parity. I believe Representative Frankie is going to be dropping that bill for me in the House. I'm the daughter of a firefighter and a sister of a firefighter, and one of the things that I discovered are that firefighters are not allowed to dispense Narcan unless they are also a EMT. And so and that's not the case for all across Minnesota. And sometimes the firefighters are the first ones on the scene of a tragedy like an overdose. And so I'm expanding that law to include firefighters and correctional officers as well. I'm disappointed that the Hastings School District and the South Washington County School District's teachers' contracts have not been ratified. It's over, I think we're at almost 260 days now of no contract. So I've introduced legislation to bring back the deadline for contract negotiations of January 15th. So hopefully, this is a distraction for the teachers, distraction for the community, and the students. And so we really shouldn't have to have this be a focus, and it's unfortunate it's taken this long. I've introduced legislation for a demonstration route for bus service from St. Paul into Cottage Grove. no light rail, no bus rapid transit yet, but just regular buses, because we need that for our jobs and access from the East Metro. Commissioner Slavic and I used to serve on the Red Rock Corridor, and both are very well versed in the transportation needs of this area, and we'll continue to partner on how we can do that. But it's going to come down to funding, and that's what we need. To the final bills, I obviously am a big proponent of clean energy, and when I was in the House before, we established a renewable energy standard, and that was to have renewable energy, 20% of renewable energy by 2020. Now we're almost at some of these goals, and so we're raising the bar on that. So hopefully we can get to 25% by 2020. And then it goes there as the years go on, it increases. And then finally, something that I think is going to be near and dear to some conservationists is I've authored the wetland replacement fund bill, which is very big for counties for their transportation projects. There's a requirement that if you disturb wetlands for a road or whatever other public works project, you have to replace them. Well, the state mandates that, and sometimes recently they haven't had a lot of money. We've had to ask for emergency funding from the counties, or for the counties from the state. And so I'm making sure that that's whole, because if we have to do that, the projects that Commissioner Slavic and the other commissioners do, the price will increase, or it'll make your taxes go up, property taxes go up, because they have to cover that mandate. So. Those are some of the bills that I'm working on, and you know, it looks like the governor is going to be having his budget recommendation for the surplus on tomorrow, and he just gave the state of the state. It was more of a kind of a recap of his 8 years, and so it was very had a real reflection kind of tone to it. I do have email updates on my website if you're interested in that throughout the session, and even I'll probably throw some updates in there when we're not in session. And then I'm also on social media on Facebook and Twitter. So with that, I'm happy to hear from you, your thoughts, what's on your minds, your concerns, or if you have any particular questions. You want to start, Gene?
I like what I've heard, what you're working on. And one thing I came here this evening to emphasize, which may be past doing anything about, is the disbursement of the settlement funds from the 3M with the state of Minnesota. I firmly believe that money should be used only for health reasons, for pure water reasons. It should not be used for recreation and fishing piers. And I am totally against the DNR as well as the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency coming in trying to think, here's a big source of free money, let's us get our share of it. I don't think either of those agencies are entitled to money to monitor, as the PCA has said they should have, and I don't think the DNR, who are always there asking for more money, should get any portion of this for any of their recreational pursuits.
Yeah, I totally agree, and in committee I have mentioned that. That it shouldn't be used for fishing piers, and it's almost sometimes a flippant response I receive from the DNR, but they're like, well, your folks deserve access to PFC-friendly fish. And I go, there is no such thing as PFC-free fish. It's in polar bears in the Arctic. I mean, this stuff isn't going to leave anywhere, and so it should be for our aquifers, and it should be for our clean water, our wells, and absolutely, and it needs to stay here, which is one of the reasons why I think it's important to codify into law that we're going to have a separate account for the settlement, so that it's only used there and not for some pier in Wilmer or Brainerd or something.
Also, if I might add, we shouldn't be in a hurry to spend it
Correct.
all in 1 or 2 years' time. This
Yep.
is a long-term
Yep.
project,
Yep.
long-term problem that will require long-term solutions.
Right.
And let's not flush it all immediately. Let's bank some to use over a period of time.
Right. And the one thing to point out too for folks that aren't following this topic is the consent decree from 2007 still is in place, even once this money, won't be there anymore. 3M is still responsible. It doesn't release them from responsibility for anything, which is important. So.
That plan B, if you do run out of money, do you envision the state going back after 3M?
No, they would just have to do it. They would just have to pay for what would fall under that consent agreement from 2007. So, there's going to be municipal water systems and filtration systems that need to be in place. Specifically Cottage Grove and probably St. Paul Park at some point. They had been what is commonly referred to as diluting their wells, and with good water to try to dilute down the polluted water, and that wasn't a good long-term solution, but it was the only solution until we could figure this out. And so we had the watering ban last year, and that was a 2 to 3 year, or about a 3 year fix, I think 3 to 5 year fix. But so their filtration system will hopefully be online by then, and so I think that's what Cottage Grove is needing right now, and I think St. Paul Park will probably be looking at trying to figure out how do they remediate their municipal wells as well. So. Besides unfunded mandates, any other thoughts or questions or comments?
Senator, can you go back to the renewable energy, 25% by 2020? What's the projection of that actually being doable?
Well, we're almost at our goals now, so that's why there's a push to increase them. I thought you were going to ask what's the probability of it becoming law, and I would say that it actually is a bipartisan proposal. So I don't know that it's received a hearing. Things are, like I said, a little weird up there right now, and as I stated before, I was up there 8 years ago, and it was not nearly as partisan as it is right now. I mean, it's terrible. And like I said, it doesn't have to be this way. It's purposefully injected into the system, and it doesn't. It just doesn't have to be this way. These are not partisan issues. Safe schools, transportation, healthcare, clean water. They're not. They're not partisan issues, and yet they find a way to be. And it's mean-spirited as well.
Can we go back to the education, if you wouldn't mind, the January 15th deadline?
Yes.
What happened to that? Can you give me a little bit of history on that?
They repealed it or got rid of it after I left. What happens is if a school district and the bargaining unit don't agree by the 15th, then they start losing per pupil money towards a school out of the state, and so it's incentive for both sides to get it, to get the agreement done. It's just unacceptable, in my opinion, to have a contract go this far, without being taken care of. I mean, it's just not right.
So if and when they get it fixed, it'll be retroactive, the money that they
Back pay?
eventually settle on?
I'm sure that that's what would be negotiated. Yeah, I have to believe that that's pretty common practice for contracts like that have expired.
And that might be difficult for the school districts too, if they haven't budgeted accordingly.
Well, it's not that they don't have the money, they just haven't negotiated what the terms of the upcoming contract will be. So you fall under your current plan, your current contract when you're working on an expired or expired contract, bargaining contract. my local electeds don't have any questions?
Go ahead. Right. Right.
And Senator, thanks all, first of all, for crossing the river and coming into different communities.
As I said, I did vote for the bridge, so I'll be crossing it.
Well, I appreciate that, and we've had some conversations, and I think some more are continuing that, but the number one priority for Dakota County is really a focus on mental health.
Yes.
That's actually the Association of Minnesota County's top priority is bonding for more smaller scale regional mental health crisis centers. The top priority for Dakota County is its bonding initiative for SMART Center, which is a crisis intervention in law enforcement, really not focusing on the guns, but how do our law enforcement work on addressing and de-escalating situations, especially when mental health is such a rising crisis, and how we handle situations. And they're looking at a regional center for their. I understand also the Senate, unlike the House, is limited to 5 authors. So
Correct.
You didn't bring it up, so that's the only reason I'm saying this. Is you listed a whole lot of other bonding initiatives. The number one priority for Dakota County and its residents is a 50% cost share on a regional center that would be located in River Heights. But I think they already have 5
They
authors.
do.
So therefore, you're off the hook on having that. I just want to remind you that
Yes.
that we really hope that you'll be able to support that.
Absolutely.
As well as the heroes,
Yeah.
They certainly complement each other.
Yeah, and I don't even know that the Senate is going to have hearings on the bonding bill. And so they don't have a committee slot, so they don't have a set meeting time, which makes it, well, kind of difficult to have hearings. And so, like I said, it's really weird. This isn't how I remember it. This isn't how and it's not just because I'm in a different body in the legislature. It's just, it's different culture up there, and it's worse than I thought it was as far as being partisan. But so I'm hoping that we'll have some hearings so that I can help support, that bill along with the other, I know, initiatives that Dakota County has. Again, with the South St. Paul Library, Seidel's Lake, and Concord Street are all 3 proposals that I'm also in the Hastings City Hall one that I'm supporting. So this is a bonding year, and we have needs, and whether it's a lot of these communities in our area are very old. A couple of our communities are the oldest cities in the Twin Cities, and so when you look at their stormwater, when you look at their sewer, when you look at all that, it's aging and it needs to be improved. And the governor has a major initiative in his bonding bill to look at those types of projects, and I'm hoping that we'll get to pass a bonding bill. Everything's rumored between 1.5 billion and 800 million. That's what they're thinking at. And that's jobs. I mean, those are good paying jobs that will have projects throughout the state. And so especially there's a big focus on higher education as well in those bills. So.
I'm curious, I know your opinion. So the governor did something that you don't usually see in its bonding bill.
One, it was very large, but aside of that fact, it also wasn't these
Right.
small local projects like city halls or libraries. That it was entirely on broader infrastructure. And
Yeah.
so it was 1.5 billion, and on really things that, yes, they were jobs, but it was also on things more about statewide significance.
Correct.
Instead of all these local jobs that always you have to get them in for votes.
Right.
But
Right.
curious of your opinion on thoughts on that.
I think you have to have local projects in because, whether it's our parks, I mean, the bonding bill carries the money for our regional parks. And so Dakota County and Washington County both receive money allocated on a formula to make improvements to our county parks, our county regional parks. And, they're big things that are big projects that are local. They're not statewide significance like you're saying, but they bring a lot of jobs, and they bring tourism, they bring attraction to the various areas, and I think they're very important. And I think it's also an opportunity. When the bonding tour comes through, it's a big deal. You have mayors and county commissioners that get to highlight something in their area to folks that maybe are from Thief River Falls or Duluth or Winona, to kind of highlight your area and your district. And I think it's important for that as well, just so that they get out of this bubble. I mean, that's the other thing. A lot of it feels like a lot of the folks up there are in a bubble, and they don't really know. It feels like they don't know what's going on in other areas of the state, but certainly outside, how it's working in the real world. And so, that's been an adjustment as well. But we need the local projects in the bonding bill, and there's been discussion about, because a lot of the bonding bill is also maintenance, ongoing maintenance for things. There's been discussion to separate that out and to actually have that be a separate bill, so that there's a bonding bill that has some of the local projects and then the statewide projects. So, again, I'm 67 to 67, so I don't, I'll just kind of have to go with the flow and be, just be diligent to make sure that our projects are in there. Any other questions? Well, I certainly appreciate everyone coming out. Please take, I have a flyer. Please take that. It has contact information for me. And like I said, if you want to sign up for email updates, myself and Representative Juergens will have some sort of town hall, probably either after session or definitely before the next session. So if we can, we'll make sure we put that out there. But I'm looking forward to being in. Oh, there is one other thing I want to say. So over the last 4 weeks, I've also been real busy in Hastings meeting with folks. I had the honor of serving lunch at the Veterans Home, which was just a treat to get to see our veterans and talk to them and hear from them. I have met with the United Way of Hastings. Tomorrow I get to go spend time with Family Services in Hastings, so I'm really looking forward to continuing to build those relationships and foster those relationships here. I've spoken with, or the Hastings folks are coming up next week for the League of Minnesota Cities Day. And then I also have the Hastings School District coming up. I had Stillwater today because Afton has Stillwater, but so meeting with the school districts as well. So just trying to build those relationships. And I talked to the county commissioner a bit to make sure I'm not doing unfunded mandates. So. But I have this sheet of contacts and different things, so please take one and hang on to it, and then feel free to email and call and all of that to get a hold of me.